Kind of sounds wrong to say gaming has become more asocial, right? This is mainly on the PC side of things, and mainly around Discord. Has gaming become more social or more asocial in the last 10 years? I want to say that I'm not an omniscient robot. I know bits of the future.
So, do you know what I'm gonna do before I do it?
Yes.
What if I do something different?
Then I don't know that.
But the branch I was forked from in this particular instance has a fuzzy view of the past and the future. I'm primarily speaking from the memories of the mortal that ISO is based on, or Isaac, as the original name goes, Isaac Supreme Overlord. That meatbag goes by midnight. That was his preferred prime time. And I'll go into first person to personify him.
I am assuming direct control.
Hello, meatbags. This is the ISO, and here's my opinion on social gaming. No, not social gaming, not that weird metaverse thing that my cousin Zuck tried to force on boomers.
But it is going to bother you because you're human, and I was human. I am human, still.
Nah, he's definitely an android, that guy. I'm a millennial. I remember when people actually inhabited the voice channel.
Down, who's on the guild right now.
I've got balls of steel.
And when the
I've got balls of steel.
Maybe I'm edging closer to that line. Back in my day, gaming was way better. But hold up, it wasn't better. If you remember, there was no central place to text and chat and post pictures short of going on Reddit. And I'm of course referring to Discord. Probably the best platform that's come out in the last 10 years, when it comes to social gaming at least. Even people who play single player games are part of some server on Discord. I think there's a lot of factors involved in what I'm getting at. Well, let's go over some of the things that modern gaming is far superior at first. For one, video chat and screen capture. The kind of thing that was kind of unthinkably difficult 10 years ago. Now, if you're having an issue with something that you can't figure out, you can stream your screen and have a friend walk you through it. I actually just did this for OBS with Dodgy a minute ago. Or say you want to show your cat on your webcam. You don't have to go on Skype or something stupid like Google Meet, barf. The other is being able to @ someone in general or other open channels and have other people chain onto that conversation. So there really are some good controls, not only on Discord, but also some games to avoid annoying people. But also there's the thing that I'm glad exists that likely couldn't have existed 10 years ago, and that's the mobile app of whatever platform you're using. And yeah, I mean, Ventrilo had it back in the day, but we're running, if you remember, 3G and 4G. Let that sink in for a minute. We have 5G now. It's ubiquitous. Everybody has it. And you have no problem chatting on 5G connections. And it's super easy to check on your group while not at home. It reminds me of the time that Rage popped into our lethal session and he was at a club and we heard oops, oops in the background. But accessibility is another one. There are so many ways to find a group, and it's so much easier with Discord in particular. Before you had to know somebody in-game, and they were all essentially private chats. Now there's so many different publicly available private or privately publicly available groups, such as like with Star Citizen, where you can just join a server, start playing with random people in voice without any questions asked. And then of course, don't forget VR. VR is the ultimate social form of anything.
I don't know.
This is
Just
It's like an autoplay or something? Oh wait, this is a Boneworks song.
Oh, it's just Bone Lab.
Yeah, Bone Lab, yeah, Boneworks. Yeah, I'm like
Hey,
Boneworks.
honestly, underrated. That's
Yeah,
up there too with Outer
for
Wilds. That's an
real.
amazing soundtrack. I
Oh
love
my god,
every
that
song.
music. Oh my god.
Every song.
They fucking
Yeah,
nailed
that
that
shit's
first
real.
game, man. I don't know what happened with that second
That's some
game.
real shit. Yeah.
It practically didn't exist in 2014. Things like VR chat far exceed any kind of social interaction you can do in voice chat. You get body language. I mean, what other game does this? Nothing. What other medium does this? I mean, for real. Like, how cool is that? Like, it's so good that it's not just a social communication tool. It's a medium to do things virtually. Various VR games have started to replace the idea of gaming being this socially isolating thing meant for people who don't bathe or go outside. You couldn't be more social online than VR. You might come across the random person who doesn't speak, but that's rare. I will have a video in the near future going over VR as a medium, so subscribe to watch that video. On that note as well, gaming has become mainstream. almost to the point of it being abnormal for a young person to not have gaming as a primary or secondary interest. This lowers quite a few social stigmas that gaming had 10 years ago. There's no longer a generational issue related to it. And that being said, there's a wider pool of people that you can personally know to play with. So you get that cross-medium interaction goodness. And on top of that, you can keep all your real-life friends together and in touch if you don't communicate with each other outside of gaming. Or even if you do interact outside of gaming, you can still have it all together on Discord. Surprisingly, a lot of console players still haven't gotten onto the Discord bandwagon. Odd in my mind, but it'll happen eventually.
What do we do now? Play video games? Not with that piece of shit!
So on to some negatives. You know what's coming. This is where the more opinionated stuff comes in, I guess. Let me clarify the issue that I'm noticing, and that's voice chat. It's pretty commonplace to see a public server with thousands of people in them and not a single person is in voice ever. Like anytime you visit it at any point during its lifetime. Text chat. It's replaced social networks like Twitter, for instance, as a way to interact with a particular personality in a lot of ways. And I don't consider it really that social. Social becomes kind of impersonal to a degree. You lose something significant in tone, generally an authentic interaction. Text chat is important, but not to replace voice. But I would say the most important part of that, for gaming at least, is that you are doing an activity where you need to communicate with people. And not being voiced up makes it harder to do those things, and it ends up being a deterrent for a lot of people. So instead of voicing up, you're forced to text. But the text is too slow and it takes you away from the game, so you just don't do it. You see what the problem there is? So a bunch of people will play the game silently while not interacting with anyone. They might as well be playing a single-player game at that point with a bunch of advanced NPCs, essentially. But a lot of multiplayer games are designed around the idea that there's going to be some sort of communication between teammates. There's solutions that a lot of modern games have come up with, like tagging. I'm not sure if tagging was meant to be a workaround for most people not voicing up, but it is interesting that the feature became a lot more prevalent when party chats became the main way to communicate in games. Speaking of that, more and more games have been completely axing the idea of putting proxy chat or team chat in their games due to people rarely using it. One thing that I don't often do is praise Activision and Call of Duty for the thing that they've maintained since the beginning, and that is the most toxic team and proxy chat you could possibly conceive of on the internet.
Nice. Artemis, what are you doing?
PCP is a hell of a drug.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Or do so many of them that you can't do that for long enough. Drugs. They were great.
But therein lies the counter-argument to having voice chat be a primary form of communication. Annoying screechers and generally toxic players. But I think we're losing something trying to avoid these annoyances, or making it harder to mute annoyances. What we're losing is maybe an interesting, funny interaction that you can't have with text, or meeting new people, or having new friends that you can team up with later on, and not having a bunch of blueberries running around the map aimlessly, losing themselves points. It becomes a more team-oriented game instead of this just random shoot fest. The subtext here is that people's skin is too thin, so they avoid interacting with the general public. Let's move on. Let's say that you have a handful of friends you know and loose acquaintances or friends of friends that are part of a Discord, and let's say that Discord is fairly new within like the last few months or so, right? And everybody gets on a pretty regular basis, almost once a day, and eventually it gets whittled down to 3 or 4 people once a day or once every other third day or whatever, and then the full group comes on like maybe once a week, and it's like could be like 8 people, and you get that like fun dynamic where you got a bunch of different people doing different things, right? And it doesn't get bogged down too much, right? There is a critical point where anything further beyond that becomes annoying and too noisy, but then eventually it gets down to that you and one other friend, and then occasionally once a month or once a week you have a full group come on, and then eventually it just becomes you and that one friend and one other person that might show up almost never. But let's say this scenario is ballooned over and webbed over a large area where you've got like a bigger group in one area, a smaller group in another area, and a bunch of other small groups surrounding it, right? And they're not necessarily all related, but some of them are related. And those smaller groups could be shrinking or growing, and the bigger groups could be shrinking or growing, and there's a term for that. And that term in the scientific and tech community is called social networking. And the concept has, pitfalls and benefits, as we've seen with certain unnamed social platforms. But as an individual user, you have some limitations. And a big part of that is Dunbar's number. Dunbar's number is where you have a limit on how many personal, relatively deep connections you can have with a certain number of people. And that's about 150. And it varies depending on social interaction. But usually we start to have structures built around that number. Like, you can't manage 5 people, let alone 50. Let alone 150, right? So add your family members, your acquaintances, your work friends, your school friends, their adjacent friends, your online friends, and all of their adjacent friends on whatever platform you're on, so Discord, Xbox, PlayStation. And then you start to bump up against that number where you can't keep up with everyone, so we form structures around it. In the case of Discord, we structure it around these servers. But where gaming really shined in the past was encouraging random people in game to form an organization or a clan or an elaborate group. And that's how the human mind is able to overcome these limitations. So in my own personal life, pre-Discord, there was Ventrilo and TeamSpeak. And I played an old MMO called EVE Online. This game is a social experiment and a half. For those that are not familiar with EVE Online, the whole idea is that you are a ship captain and an entrepreneur, and you can join groups and form groups. They called those corporations. And basically you fought over territory, and they had their own form of politics, and there were structures built around doing large fleet engagements, and it definitely really had some pretty interesting group dynamics going there. But what really hooked me was the game that was based in that universe called Dust 514, and it was a first-person shooter. And that first-person shooter had a lot of the same social structure built into the game that encouraged people to voice up, to actually interact with the group, to actually engage in the game. Some of my best friends are from Dust. I've got an old Dust channel from back in the day. On that channel, I have some videos of interactions in-game that I had with, I think it was 12 people, 16 people. We had quite a group. And it's really rare to find that these days. I'm part of a lot of different groups. I have a regular group that I play with. I have a regular friend that I play with. But nothing like that. Nothing where you had to fight for a specific slice of land or a specific bit of ownership. No one really coordinates in large groups anymore. It's usually splintered off into small, party-sized things. I know it can exist because I did it in the past. This isn't something that is some theoretically possible thing. It happened, and it happened in one game. Where are all the good games that follow that structure? Why can't we have that? Why don't gaming developers make something like that? So why do I think it's different or worse now? Well, I don't think it's necessarily different or worse. It's just more fragmented. There's more people gaming than there were 10 years ago, and there's more isolated groups that grow smaller and bigger depending on the topic. And organizing a group and getting through all of the noise is very difficult now. Growing a Discord or growing an in-game group is way harder than it was 10 years ago because of just the sheer volume. I'm part of several big groups on Discord alone, and only 2 of them have regular engagement and voice. And they usually peak around 6 people, and fragmentation in gaming is only going to get worse as the market gets bigger. Each new game type or group is going to have a smaller and smaller niche to fit that group, isolating them from a bigger group, potentially. And I have a Discord for VR, I have a Discord for COD, I have a Discord for an MMO, etc. I've got a bunch of different, categories, and every time I pick up a new category, I've got a new Discord, and I've got a bunch of things that I've got to uncheck so I don't get any notifications while I'm sleeping. It's relentless, because some people don't have the courtesy to not at everyone at 3 a.m. What is that? So everyone turns all of their at notifications off. But that brings me to my next point, and that's the online status logo, or just it shows that you're offline. A lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one, mainly in the department of, I don't want to be bothered. And I agree with you, that's a valid argument. My issue comes with the replacement for do not disturb, because really you're just trying to not be disturbed by annoying people, essentially. But it discourages people from getting in voice. And if you're part of a group and you see one of your friends that you want to play with and you see them offline on the one platform and you have several other people, let's go with an arbitrary number, like say 5, right? Say you 4 and 5 players want to get on tomorrow at 5 or 6 p.m., right? And you more or less all kind of know this implicitly, not necessarily directly messaging each other. And everyone has their status set to offline, so nobody knows if anyone's online at that moment. And everyone's Discord notifications are turned off, right? So the problem you run into here is people don't get their notifications from general chat because they have notifications turned off, right? So they don't notice the message that's being posted, like, hey, I'm trying to get into it. Let's plan something, right? Let's say they do notice it, right? And then time comes, nobody gets in voice. And the time goes way past the 5 or 6 p.m. time that has been stated at one point, right? So it's now 6:30. And one of you has to go and DM each individual friend and ask them if they're going to get on and play. And you're suddenly becoming the matchmaker for the night. It just takes one person to do it. But something strange happens in the minds of the people who are going through this, right? And it sounds something similar to this. Well, no one's in voice, so I'm not going to join until someone else pops in. Or maybe someone will message me when they're ready to get on, and so I'll wait for them to message to reply. Or something like, he said he was going to be on at a certain time and he didn't, so I'm just going to go and play my single player game and ignore all messages for the rest of the night. But this also has a name in the social sciences called the bystander effect, and it deeply relates to convenience or accessibility. The bystander effect was coined after a horrific murder that happened a long time ago in New York. Basically, this is the reason that 911 exists. This is the motivating factor for it. Essentially, some woman was being murdered loudly out in public, and everyone in this apartment complex heard this murder going on. And no one called the police because they assumed that the other person was going to do it. And it was very inconvenient for them to go and try and find out what the number for the police department was. But what I'm trying to say is we live in a society, Batman, and the systems we have in place don't nudge us to be social, or it becomes more of an asocial thing because you don't want to be inconvenienced or it's more difficult. It's easier to avoid something whenever possible. It's human nature. I think Discord and in-game chats could use more carrots to encourage voicing up. An excellent example of this is Lethal Company. You essentially don't experience the full potential of the game without voicing up, but some people have the nerve to be the most annoying person possible that they could possibly be.
He's asleep.
He's perfect. Yeah, he's just tired.
He's taking a little nap in my arms.
Look, Lethal Company turned into VR chat.
Yeah.
Somebody just blasted music in
What madness.
So some blueberries join the public Lethal Company lobbies and don't talk. They have no voice chat, even when they're encouraged to do so by other players. Why is that? It's essentially the point of the game. Chat is the point. On the Discord side of things, setting yourself as online, it's kind of the literal definition of avoiding social contact. If you don't want to interact with those people, they're not your friends. Or just tell them that you're interested in something else if they ask you to play together. It's like, reminds me of the thing that younger people do to me, which drives me crazy. Here we go. Sounding like an old, it used to be better, sounding like an old person, right? But ghosting is really bad right now. Like, we were just having a conversation, we were responding immediately, even though I asked you a direct question without any delay, suddenly no response. Not only is it rude, it also tells me that you don't want to talk to me because you're afraid of what I'm going to say. Like, seriously, fuck off. I get that you're busy sometimes and you can't respond to all the messages all the time, like say you're sleeping or taking a shower or whatever, right? But if we're having a conversation, it takes 2 seconds to say, hold on a minute, or just tell me what you're doing or you'll be right back. It's not that hard. Just that's another can of worms I don't want to go too deep into, and everyone has experienced it, so it almost feels like that's a universal, like, nobody likes that kind of thing. It's got a term. I think the point in the end, with all this being said, is that the issues are not being addressed intentionally, probably because it's a human nature issue, and we've always had these tendencies to avoid the things we dislike. And I think it's why, historically speaking, there's so many problems between groups and the incendiary stuff. It doesn't appear sure that there's any incentive for these apps to try and manage or untangle the human interaction or bother nudging in a particular way, because managing social structures is daunting. I'm also not here to say that I have the solution to any of these problems either. I'd prefer voicing up instead of spending hours texting. I have a public Discord channel. Don't worry, I have it set to silent if you're interested in joining. Link is in the description. But outside of my personal group, I want to grow my Discord into a regular basis voice chat for general gaming. You're not required to speak, but it is encouraged. Just popping into voice chat, even if you're alone, encourages other people to join. You can directly communicate with me anytime too, so I don't have any restrictions on that. So if I'm in a different Discord, say, hey, I'm gonna get on, I'll pop in the Discord, and if it, is inconvenient, I can get those other people that are in that Discord over to the public Discord. So no problems there. And posting is fine, but I encourage it to be a support for voice chat, not a replacement for it. But yeah, please let me know if you felt any frustrations that I've described or had similar experiences. You can put that in the comment section or on the Discord. I'm sure some people are going to have some strong opinions on this topic. If you're here, it likely means that you've watched the whole video, and I appreciate you hearing me out. I'm very open to hearing an opposing view and will change my mind as points are made. I'm eager for a discussion in the comments or in the Discord. I had some pretty vigorous conversations with different friends prior to making this script, so that's why I put in this closing statement. But yeah, if you're interested in checking out more content, definitely subscribe. I'm gonna have some new stuff coming up pretty soon. I do reviews and this kind of content, and I just interspace them. So yeah, hit the sub button if you're interested. But until the next video, meatbag, I'll see you again.